what's cooking down with the Wings right now? You guys are
They're on
on
fire right
fire.
now. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's I honestly like our team obviously got better in the offseason on paper. Like we had a good team last year. We had like guys worked hard and we were right there for a little bit. And then
yeah,
at the deadline, we kind of dumped some of our some good players obviously, and then
for sure.
that was it. And then this year we through free agency we picked up some really good players, number one, but we also picked up like some good culture guys that are really they're great for our young guys. They're good for our locker room. And everyone seems to be getting along great. Like I think one thing that's happened maybe a little bit is that our guys have kind of gelled pretty quick. You know what I mean? Where some teams got new additions and maybe they're not finding their spot in the lineup or they're just not like gelling with the guys they're playing with. But it seems like the guys are kind of finding each other a little bit and kind of playing well together. And we've had some good goaltending, like both Reimer and Husso have been playing well, which has been huge. And and then our guys have been scoring, which I mean that's the combination, right? Is scoring goals and keeping them out of your net. So far we've been able to do that
Well, I
really
love how you
well.
make it sound so simple. It's like it's not a big deal. You just
It's not
get good
hard. It's not.
goaltending, score lots of goals, lead the league,
Yeah,
and you start winning
it's
games.
easy.
Easy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But it's funny because like we're not like no one's planning the parade or like you know what I mean or anything like that. It's for us.
yeah.
It's more just like basically day to day, like practice to practice, game to game, and just keep trying to play with even coming off Ottawa at 1 o'clock on Saturday, then playing Calgary at 5 o'clock on Sunday. Like you're gonna expect a little bit of a letdown on that Sunday game potentially, just tired, travel, all that stuff. But yeah, I thought team played really really well yesterday, and battled. And the game was closer than the score. They were coming back a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, we've kind of found a way to keep energy going and keep guys going, and obviously pulled out a win, which is huge. So.
Well, I want to jump into the offensive stuff in particular, but I'm just curious. Like you mentioned, like the practice, the grind. Like, what's your job description? Like, what's day to day look like for you?
Yeah, so day to day, I'm with Detroit, probably 90% of the season, I would say, but I'm here like every practice days or game days for the most part. And then so I'll go on the ice early with guys, work on some skill stuff with guys or set up some drills that we're kind of focusing on, whether it's wall work or shooting or and I'm with the coaches, so I'm like in the meetings, I'm at the table when we're doing practice, things like that. You know what I mean? So we've got an unreal coaching staff, so they kind of yeah, they kind of have their plan on what they want to do for practice, but I'll kind of do the bookends of it. So before practice, I'll kind of work with guys or groups, and then after practice, same thing. I'll stay out with guys however long they want to stay out for. And then any of our injured guys or guys coming back for like off injury, I'll work with them as well, trying to get them kind of return to play. And then when the team travels, I'll go down to Grand Rapids, which is like 2 hours away, 2:15.
Got it.
So I'll go down there like tomorrow. We play at home tomorrow, but I'm going to go down to Grand Rapids for 2 days and work with our prospects down there. We got a pretty good prospect pool in Grand Rapids, so it's always fun to get down there, and the coaching staff down there is great. So yeah, I'll go down there and work with those guys for a couple of days, and then I'll come back and meet up with the team here.
So, I mean, your background, you've worked at, junior hockey, youth hockey, NHL. So if we were to look at the jump from, say, junior college hockey to pro hockey, could you identify maybe some of the key skills, habits, etc., that are really critical in that jump? But then at the same time, what are those skills, habits, etc., to go from, say, being in the American Hockey League to the NHL? Are they the same? And I get it's different by
Yeah,
the
I
player,
think
but is
like
there some
yeah,
generalities that you can identify?
yeah, I think yeah, I've been fortunate to work with like 3-year-olds all the way to NHL guys, so you kind of have the whole gamut. But when you get to like junior hockey, let's say the OHL or the Q or the Dub, where guys are getting drafted from, a lot of times players and families and stuff think like, I got drafted, now I just got to wait and punch my ticket to the NHL. And that gap is huge. Now you got your players like your, Connor Bedard or your,
Sure.
McDavids and stuff that are good, that can make that jump, just because their skill set's unique. And the biggest thing at the NHL level is things happen a little bit quicker, and you've heard this many times where guys go from like, let's say junior or the AHL to the NHL and they feel like the game's almost a little bit slower and easier just because players are a little bit more positionally sound, and that guy's supposed to be there, so
Yeah.
you don't have to look. You can get that puck to the wall. You got a guy there or a breakout, or you know what I mean. So it's a little bit more structured, and some if you're a smart player, it's almost easier to play sometimes at the NHL level with other smart players. You know what I mean? But
For sure.
the jump from junior to like pro, let's say, I think one of the biggest things is just players being able to make decisions, and then that on ice awareness. Like the one thing I've really like skating, shooting, puck handling, all that stuff for the most part everyone's pretty good at it now. You know what I mean? Like when you look at, you go watch a junior game. It's not like back in the day where you'd have 3 or 4 guys like these guys can't even skate. Like back when I was growing up, like guys legit were terrible skaters. Now everyone can skate, everyone can shoot, everyone can pass. Yeah, there's guys that are way better than other players at this stuff, but for the most part, everyone can move. So I think for when I look at young players, it's like how do they think the game? Number one, like do they have a brain? How's their hockey IQ? Can they pick up pressure? Can they pick up their outs? Do they know what basically what they're doing before they get the puck? So that's all to me comes down to like scanning, your on ice awareness, and obviously hockey IQ. Like one thing we see a lot of now is kids that are watching, a lot of highlights, and just looking at like that little 5-second clip of a sick goal or a sick hit. And they're not seeing how that goal developed back in the defensive zone with the defenseman blocking a shot and then, a wall battle on the wall for the winger. And then it's a kick out. And now this guy's on a 2-on-1. They just see the end result. So I think, as parents and coaches, I think helping these young players understand the game, the entire game, not just these little skill plays that we see, but I think that's one of the biggest things from junior up is the speed of the game, being able to get your brain to work as fast as your body and your hands and your feet are working, and then when you go from like the AHL to the NHL, yeah, there are players in the AHL that can definitely play in the NHL, and that's why you've got a lot of call-ups and guys going down and stuff. But at the end of the day, to be able to stay in the NHL, the biggest thing I feel is, yes, the on-ice awareness and all that stuff and your skills for sure, but is being consistent. Can you be consistent for 82 games? You don't have to be awesome for 82 games, but can you be consistent? Can you, focus on like if you're a third line winger who's got to be good on the wall, are you consistently good at getting pucks out of your zone, at punching out at your defenseman and taking away shooting lanes? Are you good at on the offense? Are you good at chasing down pucks? Do you have a good stick to create turnovers? Are you finishing your hits? Like just being consistent, because we see it a lot, especially with young guys. They come in, they have 2 or 3 really really good games, and then they lay an egg that third or fourth game. You're like, what happened? And then it's kind of an up and down roller coaster. But once they get that consistency, then they're going to have a better opportunity to succeed at the NHL level. And you look at the good players, like obviously McDavid's one that we all think about, but I mean every year he's scoring, every year he's putting up points. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's his job. You look at Dylan Larkin, every year he's skating, he's playing. You know what I mean? He's doing what he does really really well. He's putting up points, but he skates the game really really well. So I think it's just being consistent, finding what you are, and then being consistent with it to help make that jump. And for young guys too, it's learning how to be a pro, because you come out of junior or you come out of college and your schedule is a little bit more free. So guys get they have more, not necessarily more free time, but you just have less responsibility as far as you're kind of an adult now. Even though you're 18 or 19 in the league, you've got your own place to live, you're on your own schedule, you've got your team schedule. But once you leave the rink, there's a lot of things that'll take you different ways. So just becoming a pro and understanding that your job's play hockey, and you got to help your body, your mind, and all that stuff to be the best that it can be all the time. And I think that's something that young players struggle with a little bit, especially their first year or two.
Do you think we do enough to support players? Because you look at other sports. I mean, hockey's very unique in that we probably throw athletes, kind of throw them in the deep end a lot earlier than other sports. And it's, I think it. You know what it is? I think when you become a parent, all of a sudden, I think when you're growing up, and you're like, oh, it would be so awesome to be 19 years old and living in Detroit and being an NHL player, making lots of money, etc. But then as a parent, and you go through it, you're like, man, that's a lot. Like
Yeah,
that could easily be a burden.
totally. And I think, I mean, in the you look back at the minor hockey part of it, and a lot of these kids growing up and the parents growing up, like, let's be honest, these parents would be happy throwing their kids at 18 years old in the NHL making NHL money. But you do have those outlier parents that are like, no, he's not ready for that yet. Like, I don't want to send him to the OHL. I want to send him to college. I want to have him at home for an extra year. I want to make sure he gets his high school done, and then I want to then he can move away. And you do see that, but most often, like, parents are just really excited, and I get it. Their kid makes, if you look at the young ages, kid gets drafted or your kid gets a scholarship, and you can't wait for that player to go and light up the OHL or light up the Q or light up the WHL. You know what I mean? But it's sometimes you got to look at, like, just like you said, you got to look at your kid and say, is my son ready or my daughter ready to move away from home? Is she or he ready to go to a prep school? And sometimes they're not. And I think as parents, we're going to be able to say, you
Yeah.
know what? No, he needs another year. He's not mature enough yet. Like, he can't even boil an egg yet. I can't send him. And I've had these conversations with parents many times when I was, when I'm working with young players that are making that jump. And I'm like, your son has a hard time making toast, and you're going to send him away with a family to live. and he has no idea how to survive on his own. You know what I mean? So you're basically just like dumping your kid to somebody else, and then and a lot, not all the time, but a lot of times that doesn't turn out so well. You know what I mean? So it's just yeah, and I think as parents, we got to prepare our kids. You see it so much now in minor hockey. I've got two young kids that play minor hockey now, and I still see kids, 12, 13, mom and dad are carrying their bags in the room. It's like, what are we doing? Like, you've got to,
Oh
we got
man,
to like,
don't get me started on that one. That's
it
yeah.
drives me nuts. Like, so I just think we got to like help these young kids to become more independent and problem solve on their own. And you know what I mean? Drop them off. Yes, if they have problems with something, or you need to help them 100%. You got to still be a parent, but you got to give them some independence and let them figure things out on their own. Talk to the coach, ask questions, ask for help. You know what I mean? But so often we want to kind of problem solve everything for our kids, and I don't think it does them any favors. Not even hockey wise. I think just in life. You know what I mean? If you and I decide not to pay our mortgage, bank's not going to be like, yeah, no problem, man. Just pay it next week, no problem. Like it's not going to happen. So it's what are we preparing our kids for? I think in general,
It's funny, man. Like years ago, I coached in the BCHL and trail, and we had this one of our bird dogs or scout was a gentleman named Carl Savard, great guy. He was the third goalie. So he played at the University of Alberta, played in the Q, University of Alberta, but he was the third goalie for the Oilers like back in the 80s.
Oh, cool.
He's like in the construction industry now, but so he would help us get some kids from Quebec. But I can just remember, and I'm sure you can relate to this, like it's like training camp. You're huddling in the office at the end of the day, and everybody's throwing their opinions out. And of course, I think as is typical, you start griping about, kids these days and entitlement and that whole thing. And then all of a sudden Carl pipes up and he's like, you know what it is? It's the fucking wheels on the hockey bags. It's making these kids so lazy. And I just, every time I hear that, I think about that. And that was like, that's like circa, I don't know, 2004. He
Yeah,
called it out back
totally.
then. So yeah,
Hmm.
totally. Um, Hockey sense. I'm sure that you're like me. Like we get hit up, man, like almost on the daily with it could be a new piece of technology that's supposed to enhance hockey sense. It could be a coach that's doing video review to enhance hockey sense. And I think that this term gets thrown out. We all recognize that it's important, but it's man, it's a really tough thing. I know that we've got analytics, but it's really tough to maybe draw a line to say, hey, you invested time in this area, again, be it an app, be it some sort of video coaching or on ice coaching, and that we can see that there's an improvement in hockey sense, just like through your lens.
Yeah, I
Is
think
there anything that does work or that you
yeah.
would
I
recommend?
mean, it'd be awesome if there was just like, one or two things that they just do this and this is going to help you become a better hockey player, like hockey IQ wise. I think there's a lot of things out there for sure. I think a lot of players nowadays, compared to when we grew up, I think a lot of players are doing skill development or have a skills coach or doing extra sessions and things like that. And I think I think it's great. Obviously, I think there's a lot of bad stuff out there. I think this is in every industry. I don't think just hockey, but there's a lot of bad hockey sessions. There's a lot of skill coaches that don't really know what they're doing. And I think the biggest thing with players is number one, for parents out there that don't understand hockey or don't get hockey, it's a little bit more difficult. But you can always find a coach or a buddy or somebody that can watch a game or watch a period with a player and just kind of and not not dictate to the player, but just have conversation with that player. You know what I mean? Like watching maybe their game or watching an NHL game, but just discussing what went on. Hey, did you see that play where that player? See how he talked to him and they went D to D there. See how that kind of translated, or see how that happened, and just understanding the game. Because sometimes like we'll watch a game and a 2-on-1 breaks out, or guys crisscross, and then it's a 2-on-1. Well, what should happen is that play once that D gets sucked over, that player should get that puck back to the player on his one-time side and hit it. And in minor hockey, see it especially where that doesn't happen. Like they go off the script a little bit, and hockey is a very creative game and it's unpredictable, but there are some predictabilities in hockey. And if you can, make it a little bit more predictable, it's easier for the players to play. And I'm not saying by any means for coaches to take the creativity out of hockey, because I think that's part of the problem too. When we get our players too robotic, you want to have them have some flexibility and be able to be creative on the ice. I think that's huge. But going back to hockey IQ, I think it's really important for them to watch games and understand what's going on in the game. And then also, too, when they are doing sessions or practices or whatever, putting them in environments where it is game like. Doesn't have to be full contact or like that, but where there are bodies around them, where they have to make decisions quick, where they have to move the puck quick. And I always come back to this, even with our NHL club or our AHL club and any players that work with underneath that, is you have to scan. Like you have to be aware. And we talk about shoulder checking a lot, which it doesn't matter to me what you call it, scanning, shoulder check, honest awareness, whatever. But oftentimes, we've all done it. Your defense, mostly our D, you're going back for a puck, make sure you shoulder check. You just see a kid like whip his head twice and then goes gets the puck and then loses it because the guy's right on. But like shoulder checking should be, or scanning should be all the time without the puck, and soccer's a great example. They were showing some stuff when they had the World Cup. I think it was this past year, but they're showing
It
some
was
stuff on like
messy.
Messi. Yeah. And like some of these,
Nuts.
like, it's nuts. Like it's crazy. And, this is soccer, which moves a lot slower than hockey. So it might be a little bit easier to do, but hockey should be the same. And whether it's a forward in on the forecheck, I've got some great clips of Sidney Crosby going in on the forecheck with a guy on his shoulder and he's going into the corner and you see him look over his shoulder, gets the puck, makes a quick play. Like, I'm not live on TV. A lot of times, oh my God, he made a no look pass out of the corner. But when you back up that video, you see, no, man, he looked twice while he's in the battle on the way to the puck, which is really hard to do. But if we can put our kids in environments like that where we force them to shoulder check, we force them to scan in these tough situations, then I think that's going to help them as they get older, especially if we start this at like, 7, 8, 9 years old. You know what I mean? And really emphasizing looking around you, being aware of your surroundings, and it's really, really hard to take your eye off a puck, especially for young kids. So let's say a rim's coming around the boards, it's really, really hard for a defenseman that, let's say he's going back on a retrieval and the puck got rung, is getting rimmed around the boards. It's really hard for a defenseman to look and get his eyes off the puck and then pick it back up. But it's doable, and the elite players do it. So I think, if a kid can do that at 8, 9 years old and start getting comfortable with that, then you know what I mean. When he's 13, 14, he doesn't have to worry about that. That's part of what he's able to do. It's part of his toolbox.
Yeah, it's fun, like just being out here on the West Coast, like when the Canucks had their heyday, um, and going to the Cup final, was winning President's Trophy, but like the Sedins and just breaking down tape there and just kind of cluing in that this was a thing, that they were doing it differently. What they were doing differently is they weren't moving their feet 100 miles an hour, but
Totally.
they were soaking it all in, and just that ability. They were like, encouraging pressure to create space somewhere else. And I've always wondered like how much of that was influenced as just growing up in Sweden, another part of the world where maybe scanning and this concept of, it's not always about who, works the hardest or who moves the quickest, but it's who's, playing a bit more of an intellectual game. Um, I'm curious. So you talk about if you can start that earlier, and I, again, selfishly, I got a little guy in doing U7 now, and I just from talking to people, the one thing that's really kind of been recommended to me is to get the pylons and toys off the ice, because as little kids, then that's where your eyes go, and try to
Yeah.
create environments where they're soaking the environment up at just eye level, and creating, maybe where it's maybe a little less controlled, maybe a bit more chaotic, but they've got to just, at that age, it's just about trying to not run into people, or,
Yeah.
and creating environments like that. Is there something to be said for that?
No, I 100%. And I don't have any issues with pylons on the ice and stuff like that. I know some people hate it. I don't mind it. But I think at some point those got to get removed. And, for any coach out there that's coaching minor hockey, like U7s or U8s or whatever, like those pylons could be players or coaches rather than pylons. You know what I mean? So you can have a body that you got to go around, or you have a coach that you have to go around. And to your point, now you got to keep your eyes up, see where their sticks, see where their sticks positioned, and make a play around it. So I don't think there's anything, wrong with having pylons on the ice, but I think eventually you got to remove that and then add a little more chaotic environments with bodies, or higher obstacles, whatever you want to put on there. But I think it's huge. And the other thing that you said too is, with the Sedins and playing a little bit slower. Like one of my biggest pet peeves in minor hockey is coaches that are always like, "You got to go fast, 100 miles an hour. Your feet never stop moving." I'm like, no, man.
Yeah.
The game can be played slow. Like you can slow down and scan the ice and look around and look for that next play. Like, and we tell our young kids, like when you're going in on the forecheck, you're going in on a forecheck, you're not going to get that defenseman. The defenseman's got the puck, he's got time, but why are you forechecking that player? And these young kids are getting it, but like, yeah, we're trying to take away some time on them and some space, like 100%. But you don't have to go in like 100 miles an hour. You can skate at them, but then you kind of try to anticipate where that puck's going to go, and then take that next angle, or wherever or whatever you have to do, right? But even with the puck, players, I was at fault for this. My whole career was just my brain didn't keep up to my feet, but no one really told me to slow down. And I wish I figured it out later, but if you can change your speeds a little bit, slow down a little bit. You think of an old school guy like Mario Lemieux, and everyone's like, I wasn't that fast. Like he actually moved really, really well. He was an unbelievable player, but he would slow the game down just on how he played and how he'd come in and protect the puck. And, look for options and make players move around him so he could find passing lanes or shooting lanes or things like that. So I think it is important for players to play, in a controlled environment. Obviously, adding chaos to it, but not emphasizing all the time they have to go 100 miles an hour. They can slow the game down a little bit and take a little bit of time to digest what's around them.
Okay, so you're the right guy to ask about this. So we'll use, and I got a bunch of Alex DeBrincat questions. You probably
Yeah,
aren't able to answer most of them, but
yeah, yeah,
when I watch him play, and I think a lot of skilled players are like this. You talk about thinking the game and not playing at 100 miles an hour. You watch those players play, and especially if you get the opportunity to watch them, like the camera angle that's from way up top, or you get to sit in the nosebleeds, and you look at them, and it's like they have this ability where they can stay. And I don't know if it's technically, if it's just because they're really good on their edges and they can glide, but it seems that they have this ability, while they're processing the game, it's almost like they can stay in fourth gear without trying very hard. And then it's easy to get into sixth gear when they need to, where it seems like if it was me, like I would just be in quicksand. It's like if I
yeah,
took my foot off the gas for a second, I'd go to, a standstill instantly.
yeah.
And so I'm just curious, is that instinctual, or can that be taught, or is that an edges thing? Like, what do you attribute
Well,
that
I
to?
think no, I think 100% it can be taught. I think with the Brinkat, for instance, like he's actually a really really good skater. He's not a big guy. Obviously, he's not a tall guy, but he's really good at protecting pucks. He's got a great stick. But he is good at, like, once he gets up to speed, he can glide. He's got great edges, and he's really really good at protecting the puck on quick cuts and stuff like that. Like he'll cut players really quick. He's a right-handed shot, so he'll come in, and when he cuts back, he'll pull that puck way outside his body so that defender can't get a stick on it. And that gives him a little bit of time to make a play, or pass that puck. A lot of times, too, another example of this is Horvat does this a lot too, but he'll come in the zone in his feet. Instead of striding, he'll just kind of skull or edge, you know what I mean? And kind of like keep pumping his legs a little bit to maintain a little bit of speed. And a lot of guys do it. Barzal does it. But a lot of guys do it. Larkin does it. So instead of striding all the way through, they'll kind of move their feet side to side using their inside edges just to kind of maintain a little bit of that speed that they've already picked up. Um, but yeah, I think it's definitely something that can be taught. You know what I mean? Especially at young ages, again, like getting up to speed and then trying to maintain your speed without continuing to stride or continuing to kind of paint yourself into a corner by skating, all the way down to the corner and then not having anywhere to go. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of times too, the guy, like, these higher end players like a DeBrincat, I think they are aware of where their outs are. So when they're attacking a player, let's say they're
Interesting.
driving,
Yeah.
yeah, they're driving a player to the net, and they're not going to be able to get around them, and they're not really going to be able to get a step on them. Then they'll cut back. They know they have space behind them. They'll cut back, skate out of it. Now they've just created a little bit more time and space to be able to make that next play, or re-attack, or whatever they're going to do. So I think, again, it comes back to that awareness. Like whenever, like, just because you mentioned about whenever the Brinkat gets the puck on his stick, like, watch his head right away. And I've talked to him about this too, because he's so headsy. Like as soon as he gets that puck on a stick, his eyes are up. He's looking around like
Yeah.
all the time. It's just that's just what he does, and I'm sure he started doing that at a young age, and he's very good at it. And he's not a player that would pop off in your mind as toe dragging guys and pulling sick moves on players. You know what I mean? He keeps it simple. He doesn't
He
overhandle
seems
the
like a
puck.
timing guy. Like
Yeah,
he finds gaps at the right time.
and he's fast. Like he plays fast, meaning like when we talk about playing fast, I think even in minor hockey, like it doesn't matter how fast your players are or how fast your team is. That's not playing fast. Playing fast is how fast you can move the puck. How long does it stay on your stick till you're making that next play? And that's how teams play fast. Like even at the NHL level, like transitioning, like now most NHL teams, like that D gets the puck at their own blue line on a transition. It's not D to D back to D. It's like D up right away. You know what I mean? You'll see D hang on to it sometimes if there's a line change
Yeah.
or players are covered, but for the most part, they get it. It's D to D and up, or it's right up the ice right away and catch those forwards going up, or you skate it. But that's how you play fast. Is just, and DeBrincat's a great example of just that he's got a fast stick. Like when he gets puck on a stick, he doesn't hang on to it too long. He's looking for his next play, and if he's sending it, it's a hard pass to where it needs to go, and then he's getting it back. You know what I mean? He's jumping into a hole to get that puck back. But that's how you play fast. It's just by that puck movement and players getting open and moving that puck, not hanging on to it too long.
So like on that note, I guess, when I go watch an NHL practice and you get the benefit of watching it from ice level, the one thing that continues to amaze me is obviously how quickly and how hard players pass the puck. But to me, what always blows my mind is that you've got players that are moving 100 miles an hour and catching those pucks, and
Yeah.
they don't miss a beat. From a development standpoint, what are some ways that that can be developed, or any advice on how, whether it's a coach working with players or how an individual player can work on
Yeah,
those
I
skills?
think like, when you look at the guys at the NHL level, which obviously be the cream of the crop, the best of the best, obviously like, they all have the ability of picking up forehand and backhand passes. When you drop down like minor hockey, what's the one pass that players like 90% of the time can't pick up is a backhand pass. And I don't think coaches in general spend enough time on the backhand of a blade. And whether it's shooting, passing, picking up pucks, stick handling, protecting pucks, all in the backhand. And that to me comes down to technique. Like forehand's a little bit easier because you have your curve, you can cup your blade and kind of catch it in that curve. But backhand's a little bit more awkward. So I think just teaching that proper technique on how to pick up proper passes and how to make good passes. Because minor hockey too, you'll see like passes that look like tennis balls going across the ice because they're just like flubbing in the
Yeah,
air. You know what I mean? So
totally.
it's like getting that puck beside your body, keeping your blade cup, pushing on your bottom hand, and sending it flat on the ice. And then especially picking up backhand, like when I was working with young kids a lot, I was really big on teaching them proper technique on how to pick up a backhand pass at young ages. So when they are 13, 14 and the game's getting quicker and the passes are harder, they're not blowing up backhand passes. And they can play left side or right side. They can play their off wing or their off side in the defense because they can pick up backhand passes, where there's still players that in pro that suck on their backhand. And that's, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, it's happened when they were 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way up, that they just never really developed this. So now we're trying to fix that a little bit at this level. And it's not hard. It's all technique based. Like for instance, if you're skating up the wing, D steps out and fires a hard backhand pass. Like the way I
Yeah,
was taught when I was a kid is like you cradle it on your backhand. Well, that's impossible. Like I
yeah,
think that's a
exactly.
50-50 if I'm going to be able to cradle a hard backhand pass. So what we teach now is if let's say I'm a lefty, I'm going to cup my backhand. So I cup it, keep my hands away from where that pass is coming. And as that puck's coming through my feet, let's say out front of me, I come back with my blade and smack that puck. So kind of kill the speed of the puck. And then I can get it back on my forehand, make a play, or I can pull it back to my backhand. Because I tell players a lot of times, if you stop it on your backhand here, what are you going to do with that puck now, right here on your backhand? Your only option is to send it back on your backhand or chip it down the wall or chip, you know what I mean? So if you can smack it and get it back to your forehand, now you got a strong play to make, or you can bring it back to your backhand and chip it wide or whatever you got to do with it. So just kind of countering that speed. So again, that puck comes across that body, you just keep your backhand cupped, strong bottom hand on your stick, and just smack back on that puck. And with our curves now too, it's just teaching players like where on your blade to accept these passes ideally. Yeah, sometimes they're going to come off your toe or they're going to come off your heel, but realistically with most curves, it's going to be that back part of your blade that you're going to want to accept that puck with on your backhand, because most curves now are front, kind of a bit of a toe curve to it, or it's a rounded curve, but that back part, that back heel to middle is going to be your flattest part of that blade. So being able to use that to pick up your backhand and send your passes like that, and all that kind of stuff.
You made it sound so simple right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I wish it was that
Yeah,
simple, but
yeah.
yeah.
So I'm curious. So like, obviously, when you go and interview with the Detroit Red Wings, you're not waiving a degree in player development or skill development, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's really unique about your role, is that, it just seems like players find their way into coaching, find their way into this industry, and they just acquire knowledge. So whether it's, teaching players how to catch a backhand pass at full speed or any other skill, how do you think about, or maybe when did you start thinking about that saying, hey, like there's some steps here, there's mechanics, and there's
Yeah,
maybe, if we can figure that out, then maybe we can figure out a better, more efficient way not only to do it but how to teach players to do it.
totally. So my background originally when I was young was skating. Like I taught skating, and that was my
Your mom
biggest.
was a skating coach, right?
Yeah, my mom kind of ran like up in Sudbury, Ontario. She ran kind of the city. She was a figure skater, and then she ran kind of the city of Sudbury always ran a big power skating. It was like 8 weeks of just 2 week sessions of power skating, and it was 5 days a week. So it was like Monday to Friday, Monday to Friday, and then the next 2 weeks would be a whole different group of kids. So when I first started playing, I started at 9, so I was a bit late to the game, but I couldn't skate. I was terrible, and my mom and dad tried to teach me how to skate, but I was not listening. I was like, yeah, I got it, I got it. Never listened. Who listens to their parents? Come on, let's be honest, right? So then my mom put my brother and I in this power skating program when we decided we wanted to play, and the 2 weeks in a row was the best thing. It was only 1 hour a night, but it was like consistent. It was no pucks. It was all just skating. So I did that, and then I went from being the worst skater on my team, no joke, to 2 weeks later being one of the better players on my team, and just
No
because I
way.
could skate, yeah, like I was unbelievable. Learn how to stop, learn how to skate backwards, and it wasn't great. I was 9 years old, but so that changed hockey for me, and then I loved it, because I could move and I felt comfortable on my skates.
Yeah.
So and then when I was like 16, well, probably 13, 14, I started teaching power skating, like just as a helper and with
No
the
way.
city of
With your
Sudbury, right?
mom or just
Yeah,
yeah.
like with other coaches. We had
Got it.
but my mom kind of ran it. She wasn't on the ice much anymore, but so I'd be there for 10 days or, probably 3, 4 weeks of teaching young kids how to skate and just like helping out the main instructors. And then I was fortunate when I was young, like 16, 17, I started becoming one of the head on ice instructors of this program. So I would run, 4 to 6 weeks. And when I started teaching skating, at 13, 14, like it helped me a ton because then I was kind of figuring out and learning from the techniques that I've been taught and the other coaches knew on how to teach a side stop. Like a side stop, you're teaching a side stop to a young kid. Okay, well, really, really simple. All you do is like turn your head, turn your shoulders and your stick, and then turn your feet, and you get them to do that repetitively, and they'll nail it. Like it's just that's it. Just turn your head, and you start really really slow, and then then you pick up speed, and then you pick up speed, and then I mean I could teach a kid how to stop from zero to doing a full side stop in 10 minutes. Just by if they want to learn it, number one, and then number two, just by going through the proper ways of doing it. So going to your question, I got started getting into more puck stuff and things like that, and then when I was playing, like for instance, when I was playing, I couldn't pick up a backhand pass. Going back to backhand passes, right? Like if I was
Yeah.
busting up the wing, in my mind, I'm 50-50 if I'm catching this puck, and in my mind, I'm going, oh shit, here it comes, like this big defenseman snapping it over,
Yeah.
and a player on my team pulled me aside and said, "Hey, Blazer, like come here." Like, and he worked with me on how to pick up a backhand pass, and it
No way.
changed. Yeah, it changed how I played. And then even my shot was okay, but I had a short stick, and I was just like, I was a whatever smaller guy. I thought I had good hands. I didn't. But so even shooting, like I learned how to shoot a puck, like really snap a puck by watching a player I played with who could like had a bomb of a snapshot, and I just completely copied everything he did. And he was a righty, I was a lefty, but I just kind of okay, his top hand's really up. All right, his bottom hand's down the shaft a little bit more. Okay, he's really pushing, like he's jumping on this shaft, and I just started copying what he did. And my shot went like crazy over a year, just how much better it got, more consistent, and way more power on the shot. It was crazy. So then when I started teaching kids, I'd just like break down. I remember watching Malkin one time pull a puck off a wall when he was young and just cut right in the middle, like pulled it off the wall right to his backhand, cut the middle, made this. I'm like, so I went out on the ice and like a couple guys and I were working on this and like how to get your blade cut properly so you can just touch that puck off the wall and then kill the spin, and then we'd start teaching kids how to do this stuff. So just like basically looking at highlights and like sick things that players were doing or even simple things players were doing and how are they doing it, and then we'd break it down and then try to dissect how they were doing it. And then because when I first stopped playing, no one was really doing a lot of skill development. I had a mother come to me and say, "Hey, would you work with my son?" And I didn't even know like what a private lesson was. We always worked in groups and big power skating groups or big hockey groups or hockey schools. And and I said, "Yeah, sure." Like, all yeah. So we rented ice, and I went out and worked with this kid. And then the mom loved it, the kid loved it. So I worked with this kid for a long, long like years. But that first year, that first summer, when he went back to tryouts, parents like, what did you guys do this summer?" And the mom, like, you know how it is back then too. Like, no one wants us to tell anybody what they did. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's kind of
yeah,
like hush
totally.
hush. Like, I don't know. But it got out that I was doing these private lessons with this kid, just a good kid. But his shot was like he was snapping the puck at like 10, 11, and like had a shot that no one else had just because I knew how to shoot a puck and he was strong, and I just taught him exactly how I learned, and his shot was like unbelievable. Like it was so he was like scoring goals from like as a forward from like inside the blue line, just snapping it over goalie shoulders and stuff. And parents were like, what is going on? So now he was a strong kid. He had
Yeah,
athletic ability and stuff, but you get that technique down, and now all of a sudden he's like, wow, like it was. So then I started getting more into skill development and more parents and more small groups and things like that. So I really got into like really dissecting how to help defensemen play better, how to help forwards play better, how to help all that stuff, and that's when I really and that was probably when I was early mid 20s when I really started taking, because originally I thought I was going to be in the gym. I thought it'd be more of I was an exercise physiology major. I was going to
no way.
probably start a gym and be more of an off ice training guy and like a strength and development coach, things like that. And we ended up, this is a long story, but we ended up, Sam Gagne and Dave Gagne were in London at the time. So Sam was playing
Yeah.
for the London Knights. And the Western Fair, if anyone's been to London, there's a 4-pad rink there. And I'd walk through the basement of this rink, when I first started living in London, and said, man, this could be a gym down here. And I had no money, so there's no way I could do it. So the guys at the rink were awesome. But fast forward like a year, Sam Gagne and Dave Gagne put a gym in that space. So they bought all the stuff, they put the turf in. Like it was awesome. I was like, oh man, this is sick. Too bad I didn't have the money to be able to do this. But and then again, then I started working with Dave Gagne a little bit just on some of his programs. He asked if I'd run the on ice. I'm like, yeah, sure. And then they were leaving London. So I sat down with him and I talked to the manager there. I'm like, you think that he'd sell? And he's like, yeah, I think he probably would. So 2 weeks later, I had the keys to this gym. I bought it off Dave Gagne and Sam Gagne. Yeah. So when I first bought the gym, I was doing all the strength training. I was doing the on ice. I was kind of doing everything. And then I found a couple of really good strength coaches that were helping us out. And then one guy kind of came on full time, and I kind of realized I think my value is better on the ice than it is in the gym. Like I love the gym and I love working out. I love training guys, but I was like, God, I just don't think I think I'm better on the ice.
But I'm just curious about this because I think that for a lot of coaches, when they start, we think of, say, like systems, right? And we think that's what coaching is. It's like F1 goes through F2, and it's
Yeah.
kind of this 30,000-foot view, and you don't even realize what you don't know. And what you don't know is how to teach a player how to catch a puck in his backhand. You just miss that step. But because you sort of came from that background of strength training or exercise physiology, where it's very much about the granular details
Sure.
of,
Yeah.
of the building blocks of a particular skill. Like, do you think that maybe helped you recognize that of what was going on the ice and how you could sort of adapt that, that maybe teaching framework on how you build players up from
Yeah.
no
I
perspective?
probably did. I think it does go like hand in hand. Even thinking like flexibility. Like for whatever reason, my for a good reason, I guess, my mom was big on us being like stretching and being flexible and things like that. So and stretching is boring. Let's be honest. No one likes to stretch or like what I mean. So when I was young, I would stretch and stuff and just on my own. And I love hockey. So anything that could help me get a little bit better at hockey, I would do. Whether that was playing soccer for my high school or basketball or whatever. Um, so to your point, like I think all those little building blocks, I could see that those things helped. I could see that because I was flexible, I had a longer stride. I had a buddy in college that got a guy fell on his back and literally like he kind of went down forward and most unflexible person in the world, and he pulled his hamstring. And I was like, if you could just touch your toes, you wouldn't be out for 4 weeks. You know what I mean? Like we kind of were
Yeah.
busting each other's chops, but so it kind of like things started to click in and clue in. I'm like, okay, this has actually worked out well, kind of maybe by accident, but so then yeah, those building blocks I think were huge. And then even for coaches that are working with a team, your breakout is important. Don't get me wrong, and like a little bit of systems at young ages is not a bad thing. But man, if your kids can't pick up a pass or make a pass, you can't play a system. You can't break out. So you've got to like teach kids how to pick up a pass, how to make a pass. You got to teach kids how to pivot properly. You got to teach kids how to open up for the puck. You got to teach kids how to stop. Like so, if you can really focus on those little skills, like if you look at a breakout, what's important in a breakout? Well, it's going to be my winger opening up, so doing kind of a
Yeah.
bracket turn. Okay, I got to teach them that. It's going to be picking up a puck on my forehand or backhand. I got to teach them that. What's important for my defenseman? Well, it's going to be scanning the ice when they go back for the puck and getting the puck off the boards and getting the puck off their hips so they can make a pass. So like if you look at any system in hockey, what are the little key things within that system that my players need to know in order to be able to perform it properly so we can execute it in a game? And that may take you a month, 2 months, 3 months to do. And if you're coaching for the right reasons, you don't care about wins and losses. You care about developing players and having them, number one, enjoy the game. Number two, get better. Like if your worst players on your team can get better throughout the season, you've done a good job as a coach. Your good players are always going to be the ones that are shooting pucks at home and coming on the ice early when there's open ice, and you know what I mean. But helping those other players that are a little bit weaker to get better, I think, is huge. So I think just like as a coach, just looking at it, on how you can break down those little simple things to help your players get better with. And if you're talking systems, then what do I need? What does this player need to do within that system to be able to perform it?
How do you manage that? I just look at other sports. So like in Major League Baseball, for example, like a player between innings can just walk down the tunnel and start hitting off a tee or hitting off a pitching machine. um, you know, Football, players can just, work on those like smaller details, in practice, whether that's just running, the same route over and over and over again until they nail it. But it seems that I would think mostly due to schedule. I mean, once the NHL season gets rolling, especially if you're a player that maybe doesn't say play on the power play, like God, like that feeling that we all get when we, step on the ice for the first time and say,
Yeah,
August, where you're like, shit, like I'm so rusty, I can't get anything done out here. How easy that could set in. Like, how do you keep, you know, players fresh so that those little details, because as you said, if you lose a feel for the puck or all of a sudden you're not shooting enough pucks, then you're not going to bury chances. And you could just see, you talk about consistency as an NHL player. I could just see how easily that if you're not mindful of getting those touches and reps in, where your game could just roll backwards without even realizing it.
no, totally. And I've had players tell me too, like, that their skill gets worse during the NHL season.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, nowadays skill development's more incorporated in practice or before practice or after practice. So players are getting those touches. But even like joking, like, a couple, because what happens in an NHL practice for the most part is like in the meat and potatoes of an NHL practice is you're gonna have one or two shooting drills to start just to get everyone touches and shots and whatever. But a player might get 3-4 reps aside on a shooting drill. You know what I mean? And then from there, then you're going to go into your, whatever you're working on that day, maybe your ozone tracks or your neutral zone regroups or your breakouts or whatever that stuff is. So you'll have like some 5-on-5 play or some 3-on-2 play or some down low play, right? So again, you're not touching the puck much. You're not getting much shots. You're not working on, any of that little skill stuff, which is fine. And then usually you're going to work on penalty kill or power play. And that's going to all be in, 30, 40, 50 minutes, depending,
Yeah.
because you even look at like this last week, we had one practice, the guys flew out, played a game, came back. We had a late practice, and they got like the next day we had, 12 o'clock practice. Then we play
Yeah.
again the next day. So you don't want them on the ice super long. So what we do, and a lot of NHL teams do this now, is we'll go on early with guys and work on like little individual things and touches. So now they'll get, 7 to 10 or 15, 20 touches before practice on, taking a puck from forehand to backhand and shooting, or a little give and go and shot or one timers, whatever that is. And then we'll stay out later with guys that do want to stay out later, and we'll get more touches that way too. But sometimes the players be like, man, I took 5 shots this practice. Like I need more than that, so
Oh man.
they'll, so yeah, it's just kind of the way it is, you know what I mean? So the more they can get touches, after practice, before practice, is huge. But even to your point, I was just thinking about this when you said this, but like you think of football, backup quarterback's going in, he can start slinging passes, on the sidelines. Your punter's going in or your kicker's going in, he's warming up in a net and kicking a ball. Whereas, like, in an NHL game, you can't just go down the hall and start swinging your stick or like stick handling a puck. You just don't do that, right? So you've got to kind of always be ready in that game, and you can't really correct things within that game. Like, you know what I mean? If your stick feels off or something feels off, you can't just go down to the shooting lane and start snapping pucks in the middle of a period. You know what I mean? You've got to. So it is different that way. So you really got to kind of get that stuff in as much as you can in practice.
Well, I'm just fascinated by it because I've come to appreciate, like with football, that the way that they design practice is the coaches know, like, our first team, our starters are going to get X number of reps, and we know they need X number of reps to be able to do this new play or whatever in the game. Like that's how things are
Yeah,
designed based on a rep basis. And they know that if somebody goes down, they're like, okay, well, we got to get Dwayne this many reps to get him ready to play on Sunday. And they're just very mindful of those touches. And I just find it interesting that in hockey that, like as you said, very easily a player could go all of a sudden, if they only get 5 shots in a practice today, well, gosh, depending on the schedule, they might only get 25 shots in a month.
totally. Yeah,
And who
no,
knows if they're getting any in a game, depending on who they are. So it's just, I find it so interesting. Like, and I always think, like, if I owned an NHL team, I'd probably have call them bench coaches, but I don't know, I'd probably have 10 of you.
yeah, yeah,
No, seriously, like, I mean,
yeah,
just to get those, I mean, that's really the math. As you said, you can't go down the tunnel and go to the batting cage, but
yeah.
I imagine that when you go out early for practice, I mean, there's 23 players on the roster. I'm sure everyone's vying for your time. How do you, like? Are you mindful with the individual players of being in sync and saying, okay, like, yes, we want to get our touches, but we know that player A, we're for the next, I don't know, 2 weeks, a month, we're really focusing on improving in this one area, but this other player, we're working on something totally different. Like, are you able to get that in the weeds with individual players, or are you
Yeah,
just a matter of getting
no,
players touches?
no, 100%. Like, and I think you're right because you do, and we've got an unreal coaching staff both in Grand Rapids and Detroit that do spend a lot of time with our players, going through video and individual stuff with them and working with them on the ice. And like sometimes they'll come to the tail end of our practice and it looks like a hockey school. We got a net out in center ice. We got net, yeah. So we're and it's awesome. One coach is working with some net front stuff at center ice. D are shooting pucks at the other end with the D coach, and I've got guys down in one end with the forward coach working on some different things. So it's great, and the guys do get their touches. I think the main focus for me right now, a lot of times, is with our younger guys and helping them kind of bridge that gap from wherever they played last year, whether it was Europe or college, wherever, to get to the NHL level. So really focusing on stuff with them, but then also like there's things that'll pop off with some of our high end guys where maybe their shot selection is off a little bit or they're not hitting this certain shot. So I'll talk to them about that or show video and say, hey, do you want to, and I also, you don't want to come in too hot where every day you're like, hey, Aaron, let's, your one timers off last game. Let's go hit that. It's like, leave me alone. Like they got a busy, so I'm very respectful of that. And I'll kind of massage these conversations in as I'm talking to them. Like after a game, I'll always go in the locker room and congratulate guys, whether it's a win or a loss, on some good plays and things that like, hey, Dave Perron, man, that was sick wall play. Like he's unbelievable on the wall. And I'm like, man, that was unreal. That stick lift, whatever it is, or yesterday, one of our centermen got kicked out of a draw and Dave Perron took the draw. We ended up scoring off the draw. So we got an assist off
No
a face
way.
off. Yeah, he's not a face off guy. So I was like, hey, sick draw. We snap it back on that draw. And he loved it. Like just little things that, that are out of character for guys, or that, blocking shots or stepping in for a guy or whatever. So I love that. And then I can massage that in a little bit, like, hey, how do you feel today on this? And they'll be like, I missed two of those. And it happened last night where a player missed a couple one timers and he was rattled about it. And he's like, hey, Blazer, can we go out early on Tuesday when we're back at the rink? And I gotta get some reps on this. I'm like, yeah, 100%. So it's stuff like that where you have these kind of just natural conversations with guys. And then if I know there's something in my mind that I want to talk to them about, then I'll kind of massage that in there a little bit. And sometimes they're not receptive. Sometimes they're like, no, I'm tired today. I'm like, yeah, no problem. But 99% of the guys are like, they're amazing. Like, I mean, every guy's been awesome. And so some guys need more than others. You know what I mean? Some
Yeah.
guys are pretty dialed and have their stuff, and other guys have their own routine that they like to do. So I'll embrace that and help them with that as well. You know what I mean? So, and then you also get, I wouldn't say conflict, but you also have some guys that work with outside skill coaches too, right? Throughout the year. And, they're getting
That's
it
a
from
thing
that
now, hey,
skilled
isn't it?
coach.
That's a
Yeah.
big thing now, yeah.
Yeah. And some of them are very, kind of territorial on their guys and on what they're doing. And you know what I mean? So that's where, and I have no issues with it. And
Yeah.
I have no problem talking about what they want them to do and helping them with that a little bit, or adding some things to it, just cause I'm there day to day with these guys. But yeah, it's good. It's all kind of, it's almost like a figure it out as you go process a little bit. Like when I first started here, my first month or two is just literally just building relationships with the players. It wasn't like, hey, we should work on this. Hey, we should work on that. Like we worked on stuff, but it was more just building relationships so they could trust me. Because whenever you come into an NHL locker room or staff, the guys want to find out who the rats are. You know what I mean? So you got to earn trust, and you got to make sure that they can confide in you. You're not going running tell the coach stuff that they're complaining about or that they don't like, or that they, you know what I mean? So it's a lot of that to start. And then once you gain that trust and they trust you, then it's awesome. And then that relationship can kind of grow, and then, they trust what you're saying and stuff like that. So
Well, I want to go back to what you talked about going in the locker room and maybe point whether it's David Perron, like wall play, lifting sticks, etc. Some of those details. I think probably one of my favorite coaching videos that I drop into presentations all the time. It's on Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks, and it's older now. You can find it on YouTube, but one he talks about the keys to practice, and one of the things he talks about is sort of like he doesn't want coaches pointing out the mistakes. He wants coaches praising the little details. And part of that is, players are going to recognize that, hey, like the coach isn't just watching the big picture, like they're watching me specifically and they're picking up on those things, but also the other players are going to hear it too. And they're going to, and they're going to run towards that praise versus, nobody runs towards criticism.
yeah,
But I'm just curious, like, how valuable is that? And I don't know if you're up in the booth taking notes or how you capture all that, because I mean, a game moves quickly, but I guess how do you just be mindful of picking up those tiny details? Because I can imagine it's important for in the moment for players to hear that, and just in terms of their sharpening their game. But I'm to your point, like I'm sure from a relationship standpoint, it goes it's everything if players recognize that you're honing in on them specifically.
And I had a parent come up to me just the other day, a minor hockey parent. I help out with my son and daughter's team, and uh, came up to me, the dad, and he's like, I just want to let you know, like, thanks. Like, he told my son this in the locker room in front of all the kids, and he came home and in the car, he was just glowing, and it was like a block shot, I think. And I was like, he blocked 2 shots, which was unbelievable. And I was like, this is awesome. This is, why we won the game. It's one of the reasons, and the kid was pumped, and I didn't think anything of it. I was just, making a comment, but the dad was like floored by it, and the kid was, which I was like, okay, this is cool, And
Oh,
then
that's great. Yeah.
yeah, and going back to the NHL, like I think um, I do take notes. I do take some of the stats for our team at home and stuff like that. But I just try to almost take like a bit of a mental picture, a mental note of some things on each guy if I can. Not that I'm going to hit every single guy because, like you said, the game moves fast, and then something else happens. You kind of
Yeah.
forget. But the one thing I've noticed I've always done it, even when I didn't have kids and I was coaching, I did it. But those little things when a player like you comment on something like, hey, that saucer pass you threw behind the net was sick, and they're like, you saw that? I'm like, yeah, it was unreal. Or hey, that puck you knocked down on the
Yeah.
far wall. I'm like, that was great hand eye, man. It's like, you notice that, and so then they're like, okay, you're noticing things that don't show up on a score sheet that aren't highlight real stuff, and they're like, even wall play stuff. Like wall play is so huge at the NHL level, like being good on the boards and taking contact and protecting pucks, and so those kind of things I love, and I think that's those are huge skills that are stuff to obviously need to work on. But when guys perform it well, it's like, man, that was unreal wall play. You were good on the wall today, or defenseman, good stops. You were surfing a lot today, and really forward skating and killing plays at the red line. It was awesome, like great job. And so I think those little things sometimes go a long way, and I love that stuff. So for me, it's not hard because I'm like, those little plays are awesome, and we got to keep. That's what's going to give us success at the end of the day. Not necessarily, scoring goals and keeping them out of net are huge, but those little plays throughout the game are what's going to help us win games.
So this past weekend, you got 2 kids. You'll appreciate this. So
Yeah.
we had my wife and I. It's been busy. We're like her folks live in Nanaimo, and we're like, okay, we're gonna go to the island and get some grandparent help. And so on Friday, and it was a pro D day, so that
Okay.
we get some work done. And anyway, so we were there, and we were like, back in the day when we lived in Vancouver in the city, we were really into yoga, and that's just kind of fallen by the wayside. And we were like, let's go to a yoga class. We got this opportunity, and we go to this yoga class, and it reminded me that, and I know there's people listening right now just rolling their eyes, and that's cool. I get that. But if you've been to a class, one thing you appreciate is that the learning environment there is the coach or instructor really only has language. They can't show video. The people they're talking to probably aren't looking at them because they're in some contorted position. But the power of language for somebody to say, okay, now you're gonna push your back towards the mirror, or you're gonna push your like the power of language, and it just was a really good reminder for me. And I just hear as you explain, like that's clearly whether it's intentional or not. The fact that you can describe things, and I mean, I can visualize it. I think the people listening can visualize it. How important is language in what you do?
Yeah, I think it's huge. Yeah, it's really big. I think the other thing too, is in the role that I have, two things is I got to be able to perform the skills, not at an NHL level, like not a chance, but
Yeah.
just even if it's half speed. I tell coaches all the time, like especially minor hockey coaches, even if you didn't have a background in hockey, but you can skate a little bit or shoot a little bit, like do everything at half speed, but try to demonstrate, because I think that's huge for young kids to see that. But going back to language, even at the NHL level, it's I think it is really important on how we speak to players and how we get our point across. You know what I mean? Just in conversation, and having them understand it. You know what I mean? And now at the NHL level, they've played for a lot of years, so they understand all the terminology, 99% of it. Right? They're going to understand it. But we went through one of our coaches was telling her, "D, you got to box out. You got to box out, and whatever." So then I went to the defense after the 5 defensemen. I'm like, do you guys know what boxing out means? And a couple of them were like, no. I'm like, Totally. They're young. They're 8, 9 years old. Like I get, okay, this is what boxing out is, but we take it for granted that they know what it is, and then like maybe they don't know what a weak side is or a strong side is, you know. So just explaining those things, and then it also expands their language, their hockey language. So now when we say weak side, they know, okay, that's the side of the ice where the puck isn't, and you know what I mean. So we went through this just the other day with one of the teams on the weak side and strong side, and I made sure to be really clear on explaining it so they understood what we were talking about, because I think a lot of them just kind of flew over their head. They hear it, but they don't really know
Sure,
what it
yeah.
means, you know. So yeah, I think language is massive, and also too, one thing we got into with minor hockey is, and because the NHL teams do this, but is when you're on the ice calling for a puck, right? Rather than banging your stick, which I know most coaches like, don't bang your stick. Everyone can bang their stick, which is true, but being deliberate with what you're calling for. So if I want the puck, you know, let's say we're breaking out, it's pretty standard that if you want the puck to go behind the net, you say net, net, net. If you want it going up the wall, you say wall, you know, and every team's got their own kind of language that they use.
Sure.
But even with young kids, having some deliberate things, you know, where it's like, it's a chip, 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 not a I'm open, because I don't know where you are open. So chip it up the boards, or you know, but starting to introduce that deliberate language when you're talking to kids about communicating on the ice, because it's probably one of the hardest things, even at the NHL level, to get guys to talk a lot on the ice. Some guys naturally do it. Other players have a hard time being loud and vocal on the ice. But if you give them that kind of deliberate language to use, it's much easier because the words are already there and they're getting it in practice and they're getting it in games, and that just kind of flows out. It makes the game easier for everybody when people are communicating on the ice.
Totally. And I find it fascinating, like with somebody in your position, because, you know, as you talk about like with the young kids, it's like, you know, it's maybe a big picture thing. It's like boxing out. But as you said, the players you're working with the wings, they've been doing this a long time. And I imagine the difference at that level, it's like we're talking degrees. Like it's not, it's
Yeah.
probably like you're moving your hand just a little bit differently, or it's maybe their posture just needs to be adjusted a touch. And that's the difference in them being able to perform at their best. Um, the man, we get a lot of inquiries at the coaches site about, you know, things like say special teams practices. And I think particularly at minor hockey, when you only have say 2 hours, you're limited. It's a tough thing to practice, you know, and I don't know if it's, you know, some coaches take a 5-on-0 approach, some they go say 5-on-4, and that can be tricky because, you know, the penalty killers probably have a sense of what's going on. And but your power play right now, 6 games in, granted,
Yeah.
is on fire. So if I were to go to you and say, "Hey, Dwayne, need you to design a power play specific practice, just working on power play skills, and one timers can't be one of them," what might be the 3 or 4 stations that you would set up to do?
I think having like, again, not taking the creativity out of any of the players, but I think a 5-on-0 is a good idea, and having a coach explain that if you're the goal line guy, let's just say, these are your 2 or 3 options. You can go off script, but if you know your 2 or 3 options in that spot as a flank guy, so let's say on the face-off dot area, or as your defenseman on the top, or if you have 2 defensemen on the top, kind of knowing what their outs are. So if the puck goes, let's say, from the hash marks to the defenseman, you can either go back down to the hash marks with the pass. You can shoot the puck if you have a lane, or you can go D to D. You know, or you can walk the line. You can do a lot of other stuff, but like maybe those are the 2 or 3 options that we're really trying to implement in that, you know, in that 5-on-0 for each position. You know, depending on what kind of power play you're running, right? And I think going through those patterns and moving pucks around, and getting these players comfortable with where their outs are, and you know without even looking that you got a guy down on the goal line, and you know without even looking that you've got a guy up on the blue line, so you can make those plays. I think that would be huge, and then I think also, you know, adding, you got to add pressure to it for sure, but I think having them do it 5-on-0 to start would be good, and then even a 5-on-2 or 5-on-3, so they're still able to get those lanes and those seams, but you know, there's not as much pressure. And then I would go to a live 5-on-4, even like as they're older, I would probably go to live 5-on-4, even off a face off. Because if the power play loses the face off, you gotta get the puck back. So how are you gonna get that puck back? You know, and if you win the draw, you're gonna have pressure coming off that draw. So how are you, you know, boxing out on the draw? How are you, you know, able to give your defenseman some time if that puck is won back, or things like that? And then I think, you know, at the young ages, it's like kind of like you said about the breakout, is going through these different positions on the power play, and like what skills are needed to play those positions. You know, so you got to be able to accept the pass on your forehand, and then, you know, maybe it's a shot, or it's a pass down, or maybe you got to saucer pass it over the stick, or whatever. You know, so looking at those kind of different skills that we need to do to be able to perform our power play properly, I think would be huge. So if you were to design a kind of a power play, let's say for a power play practice for young kids, you could have
Yeah.
4 or 5 of them down at one end working on just the fundamental skills of just saucing a puck, passing a puck. And
Yeah.
then on the other end, you could have a 5-on-4 unit or 5-on-3 unit going and playing a little bit more live. And then the other thing too that is really, really big is how they're breaking the puck out. And there's a ton of ways that ton of breakouts that you can use for power play, but finding one or two that you like, and again, that's going to depend on the players you have. Maybe you have
Sure.
some players that can fly, so you can hit them on the fly, and then they can break the puck right in. You know what I mean? Or you have a slower team that maybe you want to come up as a 4-man unit with one player behind, and then you can make plays at the blue line to get that puck in. Maybe you're dumping and chasing and going to get it, whatever you decide to do. But I think having a bit of a plan on the breakout so players know it. And I think at young ages, I think everybody should play the power play. I think every kid should have an opportunity to practice and play the power play and see what that's like. And obviously, we all know there's going to be some players that are really good on the power play and some players that aren't. But I think it's you may get surprised by some player who's maybe not that skilled, but is really good in front of the net at banging home rebounds and tipping pucks and playing in that position. Doesn't mind, taking a beating or getting into battles in front of the net. So I think it's important to allow everyone to kind of try it out. And then as they get older, you can you'll have your penalty killers and your power play guys for the most part. And some might cross over, but you start to identify different roles.
You've mentioned this a lot in this conversation, just about you want creativity, but you maybe need to, players need to know where their outs are. They need a little bit of structure. Like, is there something to be said for that like kind of a chicken and the egg thing, that you need a little bit of structure to really influence creativity, and maybe it's not a quote unquote system, but you need some guardrails that to really
Yeah,
be able to open things up.
I think so. And I think, at the NHL or at the pro level, like the game is very structured. Like our
Yeah.
B zone is very structured. Our O zone is now our O zone's a little bit more creative, but at the same time, there are certain things that we try to do in order to get puck possession or in order to get time and space with the puck. You know what I mean? So it is the pro game is very, very structured. But I think at the minor hockey level, in order to be able to play within a structured system, I think they have to have some freedom and some creativity. But as a coach, we all know if you have zero structure on your team, and let's say they're 9 or 10 years old, you're going to have players all over the ice just following pucks and buzzing around, and it's not even fun to coach. Like, you just want to walk away from the rink because, like, what are we doing? So I think you got to help players like understand what position they're playing and move in position so your forwards can play left wing for 2 weeks maybe, and then the next 2 weeks are going to play left D,
Love
and then
that.
they're going to, you
Yeah.
know what I mean, like moving them around. I think it's nice to like changing them every game, every practice is really hard on players, I think, because they don't get any flow in that position. So I think giving them a 2 week or 3 week time frame where they're going to play center, and then they're going to play left wing, and then they're going to try right wing, and I think giving them some consistency there for a little bit is huge. And again, we all, sometimes you're going to have a kid that pops off as a defenseman. They're always back. They're always, playing on the defensive side.
Sure.
But still, I think it's important for them to understand and even appreciate the role of a forward. Because if you play D your whole life from 6 years old on, you have no idea what the centerman's doing. You have no idea what the winger's doing, like as far as playing that position. And vice versa for forwards. They have, sometimes they have no respect for the defenseman. They think the defenseman hardly skate, they're, whatever. And then you put them back on D and they got to go get a puck with three players, right down their neck. It's okay. This is a little bit different than I thought. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to have the players play kind of multiple positions and get comfortable with it. But yeah, to your point, I think, being allowing players to be creative, I think, is huge. We don't want to put them in boxes and have everything dialed out for them or laid out for them. We want them to have some creativity, but having a little bit of structure, I think, is important, just to keep them, number one, understanding the game, and then being able to play in a little bit. When you do have structure, the game is a little bit simpler. When you don't have structure, it's like 5-on-5 street ball, just everyone going wherever they need to go and just trying to score. Where if you have a little bit of structure, it makes it a little bit more fun.
I want to go back to your background a little bit, man. So you had the fortune, and I always find there seems to be coaches, not always, but seem to come from clusters. And you've kind of come from a couple of coaching trees here. You're part of a junior A wagon in the Markham Waxers, led by current Dallas Stars assistant coach Steve Spott. A lot of great players, and I think probably at a time when going to the NCAA route wasn't as much of an option as it is today. But just curious, what was that experience like, and maybe just playing for
Yeah,
Steve and his
Spot
coaching?
was yeah, Spotter was unreal. So when I was playing like midget AAA in up in summer, we had a really good midget team. I actually went to Back then it was the Air Canada Cup, my first year playing on
Okay.
that team. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tell this story a lot to kids because like when I first started playing AAA, I was in Bantam, so I was probably 13 or 14, and I
Oh
made the
wow.
team. Yeah, I made the team as like the 10th forward. We had 10 forwards total. I was the 10th forward, and legitimately should have been the 10th forward. I maybe not even made the team, but and then what I when I was on that team, I was like, hey, whose job can I steal? Like, who's up the lineup? And we had double age groups every year, so it was like Bantam was like minor major together, and midget was minor major together back then. So we had some older guys on our team, and I was one of the younger guys, and made it as the 10th forward. Then by the end of the year, I was playing within the top six, and I was playing a decent role, and it was good. And I just worked and got better. The following year, I ended up being the captain of that team as the older guy. It was great. The next year, I go to midget. I was the 10th forward on midget again. Like went from captain to 10th forward again on that mixed age group. Same thing, battled through it. By the end of the year, I was playing regular. I was, within the top six, and then the following year, I was the captain of that midget team again. So I went down and tried out for junior. I was going to potentially play in Waterloo, but I was going to be like, probably one of the last fours that made that team. Same idea. I was like, I'm going to go back to midget and try to have a good year. Did that, and then I had a lot more offers to go play junior after that. Obviously, just playing midget as a captain, and we had a good team. And so I got recruited by Markham. Markham was kind of rebuilding. They were hiring new coaches and all this stuff. So Steve Spott ended up being the coach. So Steve Spott's probably my height, played college hockey, which I'm from Sudbury, so the Sudbury Wolves were huge in the OHL, and all
Yeah.
my buddies wanted to play there. We all wanted to play for the Wolves. I knew that I was not good enough to play at the OHL at 16 or 17 or 8. Like at that time, I'm like, I got to go play junior and I want to go to school. I want to get an education. And so I always kind of had that in my mind, and probably just more so because back then the rules were different. It was a big man's game. It was clutching, grabbing. I was a smaller guy. I was not that
Yeah.
good yet. When I look back on it now, at the time, I probably thought I was really good, but I look back, I was not that good. So, anyways, I go to Markham and play for Steve Spott, and Spotter was awesome. Like he was hard nosed, like he was perfect for me. Like you could whip me, you could beat on me, and I would react to that really well. And like, let's go, I'll get better, let's go. So he was really really good. I remember being in practice, like one of the first 5 practices we had probably as a team. When I made the team, and I made a soft pass, and I was making soft passes, no one ever told me, and the whole practice stops and calls everybody in. And I don't know what's going on. Like no one really knows. We just all kind of skate in. Like, he's like, Blazer, if I see one more soft pass, you're going to be on a bus back to Sudbury faster than you can make a pass. And I was like, shit. So I go
Yeah.
back to line, and every one of my passes from then on were like full slap shots. Like I couldn't pass the puck hard as a snapper,
Yeah.
so I just like literally like guy was skating, I wind up and just slap it at them. Like I was just firing bombs around the ice. But from that point on, like I worked on passing pucks hard. Like that always stuck in my mind. You know what I mean? But yeah, he taught me a ton, like just on just being a tough. I was a smaller player, and he was big on me on just like don't take any shit from anybody, like nothing. And from that point on, in my first year junior, all the way through pro, I would try to get, like, this sounds barbaric, I know, but I would try to get like 5 to 7 fights a year minimum, and not because I was tough and not because I was looking for it, but I was just like I'm a small guy, and when I was in junior, I wanted to try to get 100 PIMs in order to get a scholarship, because if I knew if a guy was looking
Sound
at my
like Happy
stats.
Gilmore.
Yeah, basically, right? But I knew if a scout was looking at my stat lines that hadn't seen me
Yeah.
play and saw me at like 5'8", whatever, with 3 goals, 5 assists, and 4 penalty minutes, like he's a soft small guy. But if you saw me with 10 goals, 20
Yeah.
assists, and 100 PIMs, like, okay, this guy mixes it up a bit. And especially back then, that's just kind of how the game was.
100%.
And
Yeah.
yeah, so I did that, played that year. Spotter ended up moving up to the OHL after that year, which is where he belonged. And then he went on, obviously still having an unreal career. And then, so my second year there, was fortunate to get a scholarship to Alabama Huntsville, and I had one more year of junior left, so I was kind of contemplating coming back or not. I talked to some other schools that were like, "Hey, I'd like to see you play one more year, and then we'll maybe commit." So you don't know what's going to happen. But I had this kind of locked up, and I was kind of ready. I'd already taken a year off school, and I was like, I think I'm going to go. So I went. It turned out to be awesome. But in Markham, Jay Woodcroft played there as well. So Jay and I played,
And in Alabama, yeah.
and
And
then in
then Steve
Alabama,
Briere.
I lived with him for 3 years, and met Steve Briere there. And Steve Briere is a goalie coach with Seattle, who's actually in town today for Detroit plays him tomorrow. And then now Woody's the head coach in Edmonton. So it's kind of like, it's crazy because we were kind of a D1B school is kind of how I say it. Like we played Michigan States, we played Bowling Greens. We had some really good runs. We had some really good seasons when I was there. But we were kind of a D1B. We got scholarship money, but we weren't competing with like the big schools. You know what I mean? At that point. But yeah, we had a decent amount of guys. When I got there, the
Yeah.
culture kind of changed. A lot of guys wanted to go on and play, like Woody and Briere, myself, and there was a bunch of guys that really wanted to go on and play, and we had opportunities to go play a little bit pro and stuff like that, which is great. So and then found kind of our jobs in hockey later on, which is cool. So
Tell me you played college hockey in Alabama without telling me you played college hockey in Alabama.
can't do that. Even like when so Woody got recruited there the year before I did,
Yeah.
but he's like, hey, I just talked to Alabama Huntsville, and all of us were like, Alabama, like like
I
what, they have a
bet. Yeah.
hockey team? Like this is crazy. And then I went down for a visit, and it was awesome. Like the weather was great. I was from Sudbury, Ontario, like you know what I mean. So going from snow banks that are 3-4 feet high to like no snow at all, wearing a hoodie and
You guys had
shorts
a
all
great
winter,
barn
like
too.
it's
If I recall.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Von Braun Center. Yeah, it was unreal. Like the setup was really good. We were my first year there. We were Division 2, and we ended up winning the Division 2 national championship against Bemidji, and then we went D1 the next year, and so we Bemidji, and then yeah, we ended up. I that's the reason I went there. I knew that we were going to be going D1 the following year, so I was there for all 4 years, and it was awesome. It was really really fun. Yeah, it was good.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's cool. You know, just sort of again reflecting on everything you've shared, some gems here, Dwayne. But it seems, and I don't know if it was maybe a product of starting hockey late at 9 years old, but clearly you've been very intentional. You were very intentional about your development as a player, and I sense that's carried forward in just how you've developed as a coach, and maybe a bit of a two-parter. But do you think, looking at where you are today, that if you don't start hockey late, that maybe you don't flex that self improvement muscle at a young age, which carries forward to now? And two, any advice for coaches out there, and just maybe how to think about their own self improvement and anything that's worked for you?
yeah. The first part of that, I think, yeah, starting at 9, I think I like I'll have parents come up to me now and be like, my son's 8, and I think we're kind of late. I think we missed the boat, and I'm like, there's no boat. There's zero boat. Like you're And like I said, I always say, like, I started late, and I was smarter, I was stronger, I was more athletic at 9 than I was at 3 or 4. So I could pick the game up a little bit quicker just because I was
Sure,
I was
that's
bigger,
a great
stronger,
point. That's
right?
interesting. Yeah, yeah,
So, but I had to catch up because I had buddies that at that point that were playing double A, that were playing triple A, that had been in hockey for 4 years, 5 years, and here I am like ankle burning my way around the rink. You know what I mean? So I was like, once I learned how to skate and could get my feet under me, I loved it. And talk about skill development back then, there was none. You know what I mean? Like there was zero. But what we had in Sudbury was we had outdoor rinks in every neighborhood. So literally when I started playing hockey, and probably in October, November, when everything froze up and they put ice on the outdoor rinks, I would come home from school, bang my homework out like in 5 minutes, just dog trash homework, get it done, and I would leave the house and I'd walk down to the rink, which is about 10 minutes away, with my bag, my stick, and I'd be there from 9 o'clock, or from 4 o'clock till 9 o'clock, and I'd bring a lunch and whatever. And that's what I did every single day. Like, no, like 5 days a week, easily. If we had games on Saturday in the afternoon, I'd go down to the outdoor rink in the morning, almost like a pregame skate. Didn't know what I was doing, like as far as that, but that was my skill development. Even a guy like Wayne Gretzky,
yeah,
everyone's like, this guy's unbelievable, but Wayne Gretzky had an outdoor rink every single winter that he spent hours and
yeah.
hours and hours on, right? So he did more skill development than our kids do now. You know what I mean? And so even now, when parents are like, or coaches especially, like, this kid's on the ice too much. This kid's on the ice too much. I don't disagree with that. There are times, but for me personally, like I could have been on the ice more. Like I loved it, and it wasn't work for me. No one told me. My parents never told me to go down
But
there. Like,
unstructured, is there maybe a
yeah,
line there where it's like just
yeah,
do your thing and unstructured and
totally. It was, yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. So that's kind of, to your point, I think, like, yeah, I definitely had to play catch up, and I didn't think about it that way, but I wanted to play AAA at one point, even when I was 9 or 10. When I started getting my feet under me, I'm like, I want to play, like, So yeah, so that kind of helped me for sure on being that way. And then once I got into hockey and started playing more competitive, my number one goal since I was a kid was just to push hockey as far as I could. Playing in the NHL would have been unbelievable, and I think that's every kid's goal. I
sure.
think I was
Yeah.
pretty realistic that I wasn't going to be playing in the NHL, but in the back of my mind, I was maybe hoping one day. But I just wanted to push hockey as far as I could. I wanted to try to as I got older, my goal was I want to get paid to play hockey. Like I want to check from a team to play hockey, and I was fortunate to be able to do that. Playing some pro, and it was awesome. Like it was great. So yeah, I think for parents especially, we get so involved in our kids' sports, especially, whatever sport that is. For me, I've really tried, and my wife's done a really good job of kind of pulling me back on this, but just let the kids enjoy it. Like my kids are 9 and 11. I still feel they're really, really young. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, I'm never yelling at them after a game. We're not dissecting the game in the car and giving them, shit for missing this play or doing this thing. I always ask them, hey, how do you think you played? And we might talk about a couple things here and there, and there's times where I'm in the car and like in my mind, I'm just fuming. Like he sucked or she was brutal today, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to
I'm
just
so glad you said that because it's good to call it out that
oh,
is
100,
like it's not it's normal to feel that way. It's how you react to that. That's
100%. And I tell parents all the time, like every single parent's crazy. Like every parent's crazy. Every single one. The ones that hide it the best are the least amount crazy. So I'm crazy just like any other parent. Like if I could have my kid doing sprints outside after school and doing push-ups and doing workouts, I
yeah,
would 100% let's go. I'd push, but I'm like, that's crazy. I'm just going to hide this a little bit right now. And when he's appropriate age, I may start pushing a bit, but I'm very
yeah,
honest about this. Like I'm a nutbag just like anybody else. I want to tear my daughter's head off when she gets in the car because she sucked, but I'm like, she's my daughter. She's a great kid. She's,
yeah,
she tried. She just wasn't very good today. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, like 9-year-old, 11-year-old, 12, they all suck. None of them are that good yet. Like no matter how good you think your kid is, they're not that good yet. That's okay. Like they're just young. So,
yeah.
let them enjoy the game. Quick story. When I was young, my kids were young, and my wife was off. Like we had our kids pretty tight together. So my son, I'd take him to like just public skating at like 2.5. Like he loves having skates on, and he was great. So we went out the first time. He stood up. I'm like, oh man, and he was like kind of trying to skate a little bit. I was like, this is great. Oh my god, got home, I'm so pumped. Like yeah, he's sort of great. Next time I go, he wouldn't put his feet on the ice. Like feet are in the air. He wouldn't put his feet on the ice, and I'm starting to get frustrated. And like we leave, we come back. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore to my wife. I'm like, this is. He didn't even try. Like what? She sat me
Oh
down.
man,
She's like,
I can so relate to this right now. This
man.
is great.
She sat me down. She's like, Dwayne, he's two
Yeah,
and a half years old. Like, what do you expect? And I was just like, light bulb went off. I'm like, oh my god, I'm a nut. I'm crazy. And from that point on, if they wanted to play in the penalty box, do snow angels on the ice. I legit like, and it would burn me inside. Trust me. I wanted my kid buzzing around the ice at 3 years old, and you know what I mean. I was like, and I really made the experience to the rink, fun. It was always just fun. We'd stop for a Timbit after, and you know what I mean, have a snack. It was just like, and that to me was time that I could take my kids away from my wife, go to a rink, whether it was where I worked or just a public skate, and they could just go for an hour and kill an hour. And then my daughter got old enough, I'd take them both. But it was all like my whole mentality changed after my wife, and she's done this to me many times in our marriage. She's like, "What are you doing?" Like just very matter of fact, I'm like, you're right. I'm an idiot. Like that's, yeah, you're right. And then, so I'm really, and again, for parents out there, like, trust me, it burns me a lot of times. I'm pissed off inside and rattled, but I just really try to I want to be a good dad. And I've told parents this before I had kids. And now that I do have kids, like our kids need a dad and a mom more than they need another coach at home. Like they do not need another coach at home. They have enough coaches. They have enough teachers. We can help them. No, don't get me wrong. You can talk hockey with them. You can talk sports with them, but
100%. Yeah,
let them bring it on. Let them kind of have those conversations. You can throw nuggets out there and see if they'll bite on them, but don't just be harping on your kid every day, all day about how he played or what he's doing or off ice training or whatever. So I just try to take that approach as much as I can.
I love it, man. I love it. Hey, listen, really appreciate your time. They're just tons of great insights here, and I know that we appreciate you coming out to our conference and the stuff that you've done for us, the Coaches Say. But I know that just on your own platforms, podcasts, etc., other people's platforms, you're just incredibly generous. I think with the information that you've collected throughout your career. So
I
thank
appreciate
you
it.
from everybody that's benefited from that. And go Wings, go! Sure.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's one day at a time right now. One day at a time. We'll see how long we can keep pushing this. The guys, it's been really fun. Like obviously, everything's way better when you're winning. So it's a
Totally.
lot more fun to go at the rink, and it's a lot better than being on a 5-game skid. But it's been fun. It's a really good group of guys. Coaching staff's been so fun. Ever since I've been here, Jeff Blashill was awesome in the group we had here, and now with Derek Alon, Newsy, he's been unreal, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really really good time. So looking forward
Awesome,
to it.
man. Well, looking
Yeah,
forward to catching up with you guys in November. And
yeah, sounds good.